The following is a discussion with Alexander Komlosi. Alex is an actor, teacher, and researcher, and he holds a PhD from the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague. I had the pleasure of getting to know Alex while doing a course in acting at Aalto University. I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Takes a little while to relax anyway.
Yeah, indeed. I usually start with a clap.
Okay.
Nice to have you. Nice to have you here,
Thank
Alex.
you. Yeah.
You have a immense theater background, which I find interesting, and why I asked you here also today.
Right.
What made you get into theater, and what is your background? If I could start off there.
Yeah, theater. That's a good question. Well, I think that one of the early formative experiences was when I was growing up in New York, and my mother, who's a she's passed away, but she was a psychoanalyst, and she had, she was also like, a little bit friendly with some of her patients, which she maybe shouldn't have been, but it worked out all right, I think, in most situations.
How friendly?
Well, like sometimes when they finish their therapy, they would like shift roles, and they would continue in some sort of like, sometimes just acquaintance, sometimes friends. I think that like I've been to therapy, and I've not befriended my therapist, and I don't think I'd want to, but my mother was very unorthodox in some ways.
Yeah. Just as a parenthesis,
Sure.
I think that like good therapists do this, that they get on the level of the patient, say they're like as equals, and then
Yeah.
it could be better therapy because you are like truly there with the person. You're not the like omnipotent therapist who knows everything. You're just another human being.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But if you open up this digression, it's an interesting one. Do you have your own experience with that, may I ask?
Yeah, I've gone some therapy when
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like late teenager,
Okay.
and also in my early 20s, but not as much then. Just check in every now and then because you get to know the person in a quite
Sure.
intimate
Yeah,
way.
yeah. That's true, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, that's interesting. And, yeah, my mother, so unorthodox, and she befriended one of her clients or patients, and she was an actress, this woman. And she took me to see a play that she was in when I was quite small. And, she was an actress, she was on stage, she was pretty, I was kind of enamored with her. And it was a very small, like, off-Broadway production. I don't even remember what it was anymore.
Wow.
But I was just kind of like enamored with her, and then with the experience, and I was like, oh, this is like, I'd really like to do something like this.
How young were you?
I don't know, I was like maybe 8 or 10 or something like that.
Quite young.
Yeah. And then, we would go to the theater in New York quite often. My mother liked the theater. She took me to the opera too, and classical music. I didn't like that so much, because you had to dress up. That was, I think, the
True,
worst.
it's
the
a bit
worst
stiff.
thing. It's a bit stiff. Yeah. Maybe nowadays not so much, but
Yeah.
back then, everybody wore tuxedos to the Met, to the opera, and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but the theater, or like the theaters, every time I went to the theater, I was like, oh my God, this is really like amazing thing to do. And but then I kind of faded away from it, and I started getting into writing, like creative writing, quite a bit. And I did that for a few years when I was quite young, and then I went to, oddly enough, we're in Aalto. First I was still till 8th grade. I was in a private school on scholarship. I always say in America it's a little different.
Important.
Yeah, and then in New York City we have these like magnet schools. So they're public schools, but you have to take a test to get in. You have to take it's like math and English kind of. And so I took this test, and I got into this one school, Bronx High School of Science. Aalto Science. And I was always good at science and
True.
math, but I didn't want to go to this school because it was like immense and huge, and my class had 800 students. 4-year school had like almost 3,000 students in it.
And this is high school.
Yeah, it's like
so
Lukio. Yeah, it's like high
so
school.
you were 14 or 15 when
Yeah,
this was.
exactly, 14.
So this was a pivotal moment. For
Yeah,
you
it was
to have to
pivotal. It
try.
sucked. Like I hated it. I hated it. It was really, it was like this machine. There was a line in the halls, in the middle of the halls, so there would be lanes for like going one direction and going the other direction. And when the bell would ring, it was really like lemmings or like, you know, some sort of rats going through these halls. And so anyway, I kind of forgot about the writing, but then I started to get into there's this thing called a debate and speech team. I don't know if you have these debate teams.
Yeah, something similar, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so they had like a speech team, so I got more involved in that. And that's a little bit like theater. You know, you have to like learn like a dramatic monologue or something like that. So then I kind of got back into it. So and then it just kind of continued from there. That I got lots of. It was very difficult, which is interesting in terms of connection to IwIP. Is that like, you know, I was quite like tense and nervous in front of other people, but it was really this adrenaline rush and this like thrill, and something that I really wanted to kind of master so that it wouldn't be so torturous, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then it just kept going.
So even though it was nervous and hard in the beginning, there was some adrenaline aspect maybe of it that you enjoyed.
Yeah.
Being in front of like in an audience and being there.
Yeah, I think so. And isn't that like, I mean, if I can make a connection, if I'm allowed to ask you questions, I mean, do you have a similar experience with that? Like when you're in front of other people or with IwIP? I mean, is there like this interacting with the inner partner IwIP? I don't know if other people actually know what it stands for, but
it is maybe freeing in a way, because in reality you're not allowed to do this dramatic things. You're not allowed to maybe play a role that much, or you are allowed, but I maybe not allow myself as much. And then suddenly all these you are cut loose if you are on the stage.
Yeah,
and that is nice in a way. Yeah, I feel that for sure. So that's maybe what is for me interesting about it. But it's also like nerve-wracking and all that comes with it.
Yeah. That's a big part of it.
But yeah, you're allowed to ask questions. That's always nice. You finished this high school, and what happened then?
Well, I went to this high school. It was, you know, science and math, so the actual what I studied was mostly that. I had there was actually some creative writing, which was nice. And then the speech team really kind of encouraged me to do this theater. And then when I went to university, like college in America, then I, you know, went back to theater because they had, you know, it was like it wasn't Theak like a theater school, but there was you know, a theater, and there was theater professors and a theater program, and it was already like you had much more opportunities to do things. So so I started studying theater there, and there was an interesting performance artist named William Popel, who's now like extremely famous in the States. He's really like a well-known guy over there in terms of his, like, you know, he does very unusual like installations or paintings or objects, you know, like with peanut butter, marshmallow stuff. And
did he have an impact on you?
Yeah, he did.
Was he like an important teacher, I suppose?
Yeah, he was an important teacher. I think that he had a very kind of like alternative look at theater, and so he did his own performance with another man about his age that was kind of very physical. It was like the whole time they were moving and sweating, and there was a storyline in it, but it was this very like physical theater, and it was very kind of unusual, non-linear, and the shows that we did with him were always like slightly, you know, like alternative or experimental, and we went through kind of these alternative approaches to theater or performance, like Dada and Futurism, and he's a black guy. He's an African American, so he also like brought that into like some of the plays we did. So we did some really interesting plays from, like, you know, African American kind of canon or literature, which was really cool. And he was very supportive, and also, because I've never really gotten along so well with my own father, so I've sort of noticed over the years that, for example, he was also like in a way like a father figure, like he was in the sense that he was like, you know, like supportive and encouraging, and he was a creative type, like an artistic type, whereas my father, I guess, is, but in a very kind of suppressed, unacknowledged to himself way. Yeah. And whereas this person, like Popel, we called him, was very like open in terms of that and supportive of that. So he was like very supportive, but also kind of a role model, and in many ways, yeah.
It's interesting, like if he was a role model and he had this way of doing things his own way.
Yeah.
He didn't follow a certain script, like this is how you're supposed to be. So then the role is you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not you can't imitate that exactly, but the way of life you can learn
Yeah,
from.
it's like an approach. I mean, he lived in a little apartment off campus, and then when he would go away, he would sometimes like pay some of the students to take care of his cat, and so I started doing that. And he had a cat, and he was a black guy, and he had a cat that was white, and he called the cat Mr. Milk, which everybody was like, this is a cool cat name. And I would always, I wouldn't go through his books or anything in case he ever hears this, just to clarify. But it was so interesting to be in his space and like see the books on his shelf, and he would always have some kind of like artwork kind of half started or just begun, and he was able to kind of be supportive and help others, but then he was very good at kind of delimiting his own space to be creative, and like his own time. Like we would always have parties, all the time. I was talking to two of your fellow students on the way home the other day on Monday, and they were telling me about like parties that Alta students go to. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. People go to parties. Middle-aged guy, I haven't done that. And they were telling me about these different theme parties you can have, and that you don't drink a lot. And
this professor of yours, he would join the party.
Yeah, he would join the
parties. He would organize them.
No.
He would just be there.
He would just be there, and we would. But they would often be like theater parties. So if we had like a show, we would have like a closing party, and he would always be there, and he'd enjoy himself. But then you would at like 12 o'clock, you'd look around, and you're like, where'd Popel go? And he would just like, they call it a French exit.
Yeah, for sure. Or it's not an Irish exit.
Oh, I've heard it called a French exit.
When you leave without saying anything.
Is that an Irish exit?
I've heard it called.
Oh, Irish exit.
It probably depends who you like, don't like.
Right.
I feel like the French just kiss everyone and they do all this stuff.
That's true.
Maybe, I don't know.
That's true. Bisou, bisou.
Yep. But parties are starting up again. You already mentioned IwIP, which is how we met as a course here in Aalto University, which is like interacting with the inner partner, a form of improvisational theater. Would you talk a little about how you got into that, and maybe also what it is like for somebody who doesn't know?
Yeah, that's a good question. Which should I start with? My own experience, or?
Yeah, maybe your own experience, because we've gone through your red line of your life so far. In university, you graduated.
Yeah. And then after I graduated from that, I had a bachelor's degree, and I went to New York, and I worked in a really interesting place called Franklin Furnace, which was back then a gallery, and it had a performance space, and some of these really interesting performance artists in America went through there, and that has nothing to do with interacting with the inner partner, but it was a significant experience for me. And then after I did that for a while, my mother, who's Czech, who's like half Czech, half Russian, and she emigrated to the States, she moved back to Prague when I was 20, and I guess that was like 1994, and then I was like, okay, well, I speak Czech. I have some connection to the culture. I used to go there a bit when I was young. But I'd like to kind of discover my roots, and I'd like to improve the my Czech language skills.
Yep.
And I had a buddy who liked to travel, and he got this like little certificate as an English teacher, as a foreign language. And so that enabled him to, let's say, go to Germany or to like Argentina and just like teach English there and like hang out and make some money and learn a language, and I was like, oh, this is a good idea. I'm going to copy this idea.
Yep.
And then I copied this idea. I got the certificate, and then I ended up going to Prague to teach English in a primary school. Right. And I had very little teaching experience, none with kids. I had like 300 different students, and they were all named like Jana and Jan. They just don't have so many names. I guess they do. I shouldn't say that, but there's like 5 names that Czechs circle through,
Right.
So I had like 30 different Janas in different classes. And I taught this for a while, and while I was teaching, my mother said, hey, you might want to check this out. And I said, what? Well, my old kind of colleague, he was like in the last year, when I was in the first year of the psychology program, his name is Ivan Vyskočil. He teaches at DAMU, which is the theater school. And he teaches this unusual discipline, dialogické jednání s vnitřním partnerem in Czech,
Yeah,
which is
right.
which you I should have tested you guys on that if you remember how to say it, but I didn't do that.
We would have failed the test, I believe.
Yeah, maybe, but who cares? And I was like, okay, what's this about? She's like, I don't really know, but he's a psychologist. He started philosophy with a big kind of Czech philosopher, this guy named Patočka, and he's also an actor and a writer. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And she knew I was interested in acting, and this was like the state theater school, like kind of like Teak. So I was like, okay, and I went to meet him, and he was an old guy even back then. He must have been like 70 something, and already a little bit hard of hearing. He had a hearing aid. And my Czech was really not that great. And he speaks in a very unusual way. Like, he's very intelligent. He's quite an intellectual, but he also uses the Czech language in kind of unusual ways, like twists and turns it.
Yeah, some people do that.
Yeah.
Especially like public philosophy figures, I feel.
Yeah, yeah.
They have this way. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and he like, I spoke to him for a while, or he spoke to me. It was more like a little bit of a monologue that he told me about what he did, what this discipline was about, and I understood very little.
Yeah.
I think I understood because of the Czech. My Czech was so poor. I think I understood 20%. But I caught some names, like Freud and like Ego and Stanislavski, who's the founder of modern acting, and something about dialogue and like alone on stage and improvisation and this kind of stuff. So I kind of caught some like interesting themes or questions or ideas, and I was like, this is interesting, and hey, look, I can go do something. I could, just try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then I went there and I tried this interacting with the inner partner with the next beginner course, and in Viskočil he always has been, and especially then he was very encouraging, not just to me but to everyone. But then he also, like, in a sense, he said some things to me at the beginning which were very kind of like, seemed to like signify in my mind that I guess that I had like a talent for that, for being on stage, and I was like, oh, okay, that's good. And so I kept going, and then I was like, ooh, this is really interesting. Can you study this? And he said, yes, you can do it as a master's. And I was like, whoa.
Really?
Yeah.
Like IwIP in the center of...
Well, it's not just IwIP. It's a program in authorial acting. So this is kind of his conception, and it's this kind of concept of like acting or authorship, and not just like the sense of being an actor on stage, but kind of like in life, or like creativity, and so many people there weren't talented as actors. They weren't interested in acting, but they were, let's say, teachers, or they were drama teachers or regular teachers or psychologists, and they kind of like added this to their repertoire in a way, but as in a master's degree. And it was often older people who studied there, not just like 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds.
Right. So this is an interesting aspect of this teaching, that it's not acting in the center, but sort of like how life can be a stage. So it's like acting, but you can apply it in life, and you mentioned like the psychology aspect of it, and sort of understanding yourself via these lessons. Yeah, exactly. On stage.
Exactly. Yeah.
But still, I'm not sure if we did explain like what it concretely is. This what how would you say it?
Viskočil.
Viskočil.
Yeah.
What Viskočil like proposed.
Yeah. So yeah, but I think that's a really good point, that it does have to do. That's a good like segue connection. That it does have to do with this idea of not just acting on stage, but kind of like acting on the stage of life, of understanding yourself as a person, which also helps as a creator, as an actor.
In anything.
Yeah, in anything, and I think especially in like creative pursuits, this idea of like knowing your own material and understanding your own material, and being honest with yourself and open with yourself, and like in dialogue with yourself, basically being able to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what the discipline, and it's about so many things, but I think, at least for today, I would say that that's like a core aspect of it, is like that this idea that we have different like perspectives in us, that we have different views in us, different like partners in us, different voices in us, and they're not, because this has to do with performing, as you know from your experience. I'd be curious to hear about your experience too.
Yeah.
It's not just like a voice, it's not just like words, but it's the whole like our body. It's our whole kind of like psychosomatic persona or person. It's a kind of tension, it's a kind of expressivity, it's a kind of feeling, it's a kind of, it's a whole kind of like very a holistic idea of the person, and that these different perspectives each maybe have like a slightly different tension in their body, that they might have a different rhythm, they might have a different feeling to them, and that they can be kind of, you can put them in or find a way, set up conditions, practice conditions to get them in dialogue with each other more kind of like fluently. And in doing so, in like looking for ways how that can happen, you're actually making that happen. And you're kind of discovering what is important for that to happen for you, and like these basic principles of like dialogue and acting and interacting and in front of others. Because you're in front of others, you're alone. You're not supposed to contact anybody with your eyes, as you know. It's an unusual situation of being like as if alone, but not, because you know there are people there, and like, but yet being able to kind of be with yourself primarily in front of other people.
Yeah, that's like a pragmatic way of saying it. I now have a couple of months experience of this, and you have like many years experience, so you have obviously a much richer view. But my like sort of simplified way is you are alone in front of an audience, and in front of that audience you get so much energy just being there, but you try to shut out the audience and use that energy to focus on yourself. So it's sort of like heightened awareness maybe.
That's part of it, yeah.
And with that you can see these different sub-personalities of your own being that take place, and they come so much more intensively when you have the other people there watching you. Yeah. And just giving them some room and attention can be very a learning experience, I suppose. So that's one way of putting it. But you had interesting how I feel it must have changed for you over time what you get out of, or how you understand this sort of.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Like, Like, would you a bit touch upon that? How it was when you started? What was your primary objective? Why you did it, and how it has changed maybe to now?
Yeah. If I should be able to find my notebooks, I wish I could. Perhaps I could actually not make it up. Like I'm going to make it up now, or try and remember, try to recall.
It's hard.
But I think that because it's been like almost 20 years or something like that. So, and when you get old, your brain cells start dying, or maybe not. Maybe what you're going to say that they're not. You're going to give me hope.
You're different at good things at different ages in life.
Thank you. That's a very nice way to put it. Yeah.
I think your attention becomes better when you're older. And
sure. Yeah. You don't think about sex all the time.
True.
That's what my friend said, like, who's also my age. He's like, 20 years ago, all I could think about was sex, but now it's not the case anymore.
Yeah, that's not frees a lot of time.
It frees a lot of like energy, and attention to like not think about that. But anyway, there's a little digression. But I think back then, it was just I had to go up on stage in front of other people. I didn't really know what the hell was going on, what I was supposed to do. It was so confusing, but like the like energy and the tension that I felt was like absolutely tremendous. It was too much for me. It was way too much for me, and I was like, I don't want it to be like this. I want to kind of like try and master this situation, whatever that means. I'd like to kind of like understand it, and I had this kind of like intuition that I kind of felt like I know what it could be like. I know it can be like kind of more relaxed or free or spontaneous, because I'd had these really positive performative experiences where it was like kind of like listening to yourself and playing, and this kind of like flow, and
you had glimpses of it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, glimpses, but also when you have a text, when you have something given to you that you learn, you have something to hold on to, and you have like this object that you interact with, even if it's like eventually integrated into yourself as like lines or speech or words or whatever. But in this, in interacting with the inner partner, you just have some like ideas, you have some suggestions from the teacher, like, okay, interact with your inner partners. Oh, thanks a lot. What the hell does that mean? What is that? Well, how? Like, what's going on? It's very confusing.
You just don't know what's gonna happen.
No.
There is no like
Yeah, you don't know.
preset.
And so I think that my first motivation was kind of like to like make it better, to like, master it, to like get to a place where I could start noticing what I was doing, that I could like remember what happened. Like you said the other day, and I can empathize with that. Like the first couple of times I did it, I just didn't remember. I was there for 3 minutes and I sat down and I didn't really remember what I did. I had done. I just, one or few moments, I was like, okay. And then Viscocho would give me, like, he'd be like, you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that. And I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess I did. And then you're confronting this, like, this energy, this subjective experience that's so strong with somebody outside you, like this Viscocho, this teacher, who's like kind of in a way objectivizing it, like making it more concrete and helping you get some distance from your own actions. And that's basically what you're trying to like also integrate in yourself in a way. In a way you're kind of trying to, or I don't know if you're trying to, but I think, we learn by, through these mirror neurons, we learn by copying other people, we learn by observing. I have a kitten now, and she's like, it's similar, it's not so advanced maybe, but she follows us around everywhere. Whatever you do, she's interested in. She just like has to try it. It's just like programming. It's just like that's the way that so many beings are. So you just kind of like by I don't know if it's like what's the word, diffusion or something like that. You start to take in this kind of like, okay, this is what you've done, this is what you've done, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. And I think it helps to like internalize this kind of partner in you that has some distance from what the hell's going on out there.
So you said that Viscocho would be very supportive, like positive feedback.
Yeah.
I suppose he must have given some like maybe hints or like pointing out that was interesting. What was that like?
Yeah.
And sort of guided the learning.
Yeah.
So that's
for sure.
like the mirroring aspect maybe, that he says this is important. What is it? And then looking at that thing.
Yeah.
Yourself. So that's how it started out. And I suppose you got comfortable. You get comfortable being in that space.
Yeah. And you get more and more kind of comfortable and more aware. And you start playing, I think, a lot more spontaneously, and you start also learning about like the themes that are important to you, the questions that are important to you. So not only kind of like the like existential like feelings or tensions or somatic kind of aspects of it, but like the themes, like what if you're impatient with yourself, if you're critical with yourself, if you're aggressive, or like you start. Like, and these things keep coming back, they repeat, like in therapy too. You often mention something and then 5 weeks later it comes up again or something along those lines. And so, so many with Buddhism, so many of these like philosophies talk about these patterns, that were made of these patterns. And so you start noticing your patterns. So not only do you like get more comfortable, I guess in some ways you do. And then you also like start to understand, you're like, whoa, I can be a real asshole. Primarily to myself.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Am I being an asshole to other people too? Oh yeah, maybe I am sometimes being an asshole to other people too.
Yep.
But then you notice nice things. You're like, oh, but I can be like really silly. I can be really like, I can really make funny stuff up and have a really good time with myself. And you're like, oh, but hey, I do this with other people too. So you start kind of realizing then this world that's you and your buddies, your inner partners, buddies, that's funny, also exists out in the rest of the world. What do you think? Do you have, you've been doing it for like maybe 2 months or something.
I feel like you mentioned awareness is such a key word in there, that you as you are aware, whatever that means, just to actually notice things around you and in yourself. As you're aware, you start noticing these things. And then, like, maybe without judgment is key. Like, it's so easy to notice that that critical voice and then be, damn, that critical voice, I don't want it. But in IwIP, I think you mentioned sometime, like, just be with it. Notice it. You don't have to do anything more than that. And then it has something to say, and it's said, it's done. So it's sort of this, as I understand it, maybe I like to be poetic, but it's like a journey of self understanding.
Yeah,
This like IwIP thing, but
it can be for sure. Yeah.
it can be, and it can also be just maybe it is more just a way to energize your Tuesday evenings, because it's very energetic just being with people in such an like intimate, not intimate, but energetic way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, I think, how our society has gotten off the rails in such a way that you have to learn awareness in a theater course. Like, does it feel that way? You also mentioned that you started noticing these things for the first time. That maybe, wow, I can be like this, I can be like that. How is it? It's such an important thing, I feel.
Yeah.
Awareness. How have we missed it so totally? Or do you think we have?
I don't know, you know, it's like I think it depends on the culture and your family and I think that I had this one interesting experience. We had this kind of little conference at DEAC at Uni Arts, and there was a guy who came in from New Zealand, a dancer, and he teaches dance there in New Zealand, and he did like a circle dance with us.
Nice.
Which was, you
was
know,
it a rain dance or?
No, it was like a circle dance or like a line dance. I don't remember what he did, but it was basically like, you know, 2 or 3 very simple moves, and that you have to basically take turns dancing with other people with these very simple moves. But at the same time, it was the whole group. And it was really, I think, it sounds a little bit cheesy when I say it, but who cares? It's like, it was really nice that you had a way to move rhythmically, musically, with other people, touching them, not in any like perverse way, but making contact with them, you know, physically, and like sharing a space, doing something very simple but like creative, like together.
Yeah.
And it all of a sudden, you know, where people are people and they need other people, and technology is great, but you don't get the pheromones through you know, Zoom. You know, you don't get like you don't get the like energy from the person. You know, it's like mediated, and I think that there's something really specific about live performance, about live interaction, and I think that maybe that's something, you know, we could do more of as like as cultures, or at least this culture, you know, that I'm in. I can't speak for all cultures, but you know, spend time, you know, doing things together. Parties are great, these kind of social gatherings. That's, I think, a part of it too, and it depends what you do there, of course.
Yep.
But I think these kind of things of sharing like some play together, I think is like our playful situation together, where it's like also somehow physical, is really great. We play once in a while. We play with our kids, and when they have friends over, we play like charades, you know, where you have to like act out things and this kind of thing. And, you know, this one kid comes over, and I don't think he's ever played anything like this. And he's on his phone all the time. And, you know, this. And I don't want to demonize this because my son does it, and it's like the times now. But there is something like about, like you said, like being in front of other people, with other people, in a performance situation, in a play situation, which it's hard. It's impossible to get it in another way, I think.
Yeah, it seems so built into us.
Yeah,
like
it does.
You don't need much, like you said, it can be very simple. Just stand together in a circle and do, I don't know, eye contact, and all these pheromones and group dynamics come into play so intensely.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very natural for us for have them happening.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
Yeah, I feel like you mentioned parties, and there's a note there that I think like we have all these opportunities in parties to feel these intense emotions, but then we go and use, like, at least in Finnish society, there's always alcohol involved.
But you young people are drinking less than we did in the past, didn't you?
Yeah, but we still drink. It's
sure.
not, maybe less. Maybe it's more okay nowadays to not drink as much.
Right.
I don't know, but from my experience at least, I look back at all these learning opportunities at parties I've had, dancing together, talking with people, and they've been so easy because you have this social lubricant, which is very good, which is alcohol, but it also makes you not see all the challenges and interesting aspects, because you're just walking in and you don't really give a fuck. It goes very smoothly with that. So
that's true. Yeah.
So if we had more of these, in a way, interactions where it's a party but it's not involved with alcohol.
It might be interesting. I think that like in some ways a little lubrication could help, and not
for
like
sure.
the right kind of lubrication. Shouldn't let our imaginations go too far. It just to relax things. It's true.
Yeah.
But then is something about a situation where there isn't that, and you have the tension there, in the group and in yourself. And then what do you do to like go through that tension, to like release that tension, like together, or with other people? And that also is like really wonderful, because you have tension and then you have catharsis and you go through that. And without the like tension, you can't have the catharsis, really.
And when you say catharsis, you mean just like this synthesizing and learning from the tension, or it's like
well, like catharsis is like in this sense, I mean it like that you like the tension is released and something and you kind of like learn you learn something from it in that sense.
Yeah, because it is a great feeling when you have something challenging which makes you tense, and then you have to challenge it and push through it.
Yeah.
And it sucks and it's hard, but then it's really nice once you do it.
Yeah.
And it often doesn't take quite a long time. I find it interesting. It can be so like tense and really a difficult moment, and then you think about it in hours beforehand, and then 5 seconds after you start the thing, everything is lost. You forget the tension.
You have an example?
Like going on stage, I feel can be
right,
you can be very tense once you go. Maybe 5 seconds or 50, but still it's quite short period of time that it takes to get used to it. Or at a party. I mean, if there's a party at your house, and you're like, maybe I can be in my room and be like, man, I need to go out there and do this, and how can I dare go to talk to these people? And then you walk up and start talking, and after 5 seconds it's like, oh, this is how you do it. You build up this monster in your head, which is much maybe larger than reality. But it is like this kind of question of course we want to feel like comfortable and we want to feel relaxed, and but there is something about, not to be like a masochist or too hardcore about it, but there is something like character building. That sounds stupid. That's something I'd say that's what my father would say. Yeah. What does not kill you makes you stronger. But there is something true to that. But it's like, okay, it's okay to be uncomfortable sometimes. It's okay to feel like, uncomfortable with other people. And then the question is, when you create this more comfortable situation, and that's one thing Viscocho was really interested in. And that's also one thing when I teach these classes is like, how do you, maybe one person can lead it, somebody can provoke it, like this guy in New Zealand. It wasn't just about this activity, but it was his personality, it was the way he related to us. How do you, tune in like an atmosphere that's in a situation like that is conducive to like creating like a comfort or permitting people to feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable? How do you like consciously create that kind of an atmosphere, that kind of a situation, so that these kind of like positive, let's say, feelings or pleasant feelings and difficult feelings are all like allowed in a way, and you can go through them all. And that's like I think like an interesting like question too, when you talk about these media and like this like being with people. My wife, for example, she works sometimes when in her work situations, maybe I shouldn't say too much, but she's a very friendly, kind, nice, like kind of bubbly person. She's very like positive, and so she kind of spreads this positivity in situations. And I know that she's found herself in situations, whether work or elsewhere, where like there's a kind of like tension there, when there's like a kind of like, people don't even turn on their cameras on Zoom or something like that. They're like, moi, and then they turn them off, and then it's like, well, what does that do for the atmosphere of like collaboration or working together, if you're not open to like yourself and open to other people? I don't know. Right. It's a difficult thing to do, to create this atmosphere. How do you think about it? Like creating that sort of safe space, maybe, where you feel these positive feelings, but you're also exploring. Well, how do you think about creating that sort of environment?
I think that like it's helped me over the years to, it's always good to be kind of like, as much as you can, like admit how it is for you, how it is for me. So if I'm feeling like tense or uncomfortable or nervous, this is this interacting with the inner partners, that it's good for helping you notice these things.
Do you mean now to say it out loud in front of like the group, or just noticing it in yourself?
Yeah, I don't
and
know
being
if
honest about it.
Yeah, I don't know if you always have to say it out loud in the group. It depends, but definitely noticing it and saying, okay, this is how it is now, and this is what I'm going through now, and there's going to be something next. It's like, I know this is going to like finish at some point. I think back in the day, it wouldn't pass so quickly, and I might stay tense for a longer time. For example, when I started teaching, what helped a lot is that some students said, hey, Alex, you're like a good teacher. Just take it easy,
Yeah.
and then you start taking it easy. And then I think it helps to like admit these things to yourself, perhaps to others in the group. And then it makes you feel somehow, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but it makes you feel like you are there. You are there in the present moment with these people, and that you're sharing this experience with them. And in a sense, it depends on the situation, because nowadays and in different situations, people don't like authorities, or in certain situations, or, there has to be this like this kind of democratic kind of like feeling. But I still think that in many situations, it helps to have like a leader or two leaders, depending. Maybe, and then it doesn't mean they're always the leader, or they have to be like an asshole leader, but they're basically somebody who takes responsibility for the situation.
Right.
And that's all that means. It doesn't mean they know any better, or they're like more powerful, but they take the responsibility, and that sometimes helps people if they're in a situation that they don't know, and they don't feel like they can be responsible for it yet. And by taking that responsibility, you can then give the responsibility. You can enable the responsibility in other people too, and then they feel comfortable. So like, in a way, if you set the tone with yourself and in yourself, and you kind of like, say how things are, but also say that basically, everything's okay. Oh right, the sound. Then the air. Then I think that helps the atmosphere quite a bit. I don't know. What's your experience with that?
I feel you said something very interesting there, that you it's good to have someone who has the responsibility, because then they can have it and people can be calm, but you can also give the responsibility to someone else. And my experience with these sort of scenarios, when you have people and there should be that something should be done, that when people feel responsibility, they actually do things. If there is shared responsibility, that's like no responsibility. Or if it's very important that you feel responsible, like you take ownership of your own actions.
Sure, but I think you could have like shared responsibility. I personally,
it's not impossible.
Yeah. I think that it's like, but it's harder, and it depends on the situation. I think like what happens.
Yeah, I felt you were a good teacher in this course we did. Like as you mentioned, the teacher has naturally this role of authority, but it doesn't mean they're always the dictator that moves everything. Sometimes you can relinquish control and let things happen and just sort of guide. And the other thing I liked what you said was that the doesn't mean that the leader person doesn't know necessarily better than anyone else. It's just that's their role in this situation.
Right.
Everyone has different roles, and their role is simply to sort of guide the whole of the ship.
Yeah. And they might, like, let's say, in certain situations, and this is where it gets maybe complicated in some ways, like, in certain situations, the leader might have, like, let's say, more experience or more expertise in, like, one thing. Yep. And so, like, let's say me as a teacher with IwIP, it doesn't mean like I'm better at it, but it's just like I know it, like, kind of more, like I wouldn't go to a classroom and be like, okay, this is how, you do this like weird computer algorithm, that would be pretty comic if I went in there
it's natural.
trying to assume some responsibility for that, and I would give respect to somebody who did have that like expertise or knowledge or something like that.
Yep.
But it's also a question of like Viskucho was always nice, is that he was quite like he's quite like an alpha personality, and very much like I'm in control, and but he always said, I don't want to be authoritative, but I want to be like, I don't want to be authoritarian, but I want to be an authority. And
Nice.
And yeah, and it's like a question of like how, like if somebody is in a leadership role or authority position, how they do that. You could be really condescending. You could be really like condescending to people who are, let's say, beneath you, or like in quotes.
Right.
And then that doesn't like, that just sucks.
And people are very sensitive to that.
Sure. And
we
then
are such intelligent social beings that you notice instantly, even if they don't say it out loud, all these small movements and all these interactions. It becomes clear if somebody feels that way, or if there's some other tension there.
Yeah. And Finland being like, my experience is that it's such a like a consensus society, and like, this like emphasis on like equality, and so then it like, it's always like a cultural thing. How do you deal with it? I think in the Czech Republic, there's like, it's much more formal, and there's more like structures like that reinforce kind of like hierarchy in lots of different ways, and so it's like a little bit more acceptable there, the kind of hierarchical like interaction.
Because that's my like thinking about this is that's like the old school way of doing things. You have the hierarchy of leader who's very authoritative, and he or she does whatever. Like this is how we do things. But now, new age 2021, it should be like democratic and everyone has a say. Which makes the role of the facilitator, or the role of the leader, so much more complex, because you have to be this. You have authority, but you can't use it too much. You have to be one of the others, and it must have been easier when it was just, I'm gonna do whatever, and everyone has to follow.
It might have been easier on one hand, but like imagine the pressure that this person like has on themselves, and like creates for them, and they're like how much they have to hold on to this like this power. It must be fucking really stressful.
True.
Now you can lay back and take it a little easier, hopefully.
But it's such a beautiful topic, how you can like create this space of safety, and create this space where people are, I don't know, free to be themselves, because that's a creative space. It's so easy when interacting with people that you create a more aggressive space, or a space where people are on the defense and aren't as like forthcoming. It's an important I don't know, skill, maybe it is.
I think it is, or at least to like start by being aware of it, that like this is like an important thing, and that like what I do and what I bring into the situation, affects it. And Czechs are very kind of, they're quite formal, and they can also be a little bit like Finns. They sometimes, not all Finns, I shouldn't make generalizations, but tend to be a little bit like reserved, or shy or something like that. So, then if you get like a group of like shy people together, it creates like, it's like you have to like, it would often make me start to feel like uncomfortable, because then I also felt shy. I also felt reserved at times, and I do too still, like who doesn't? But then it's like, what risk I guess you take to open up the situation.
And I was gonna ask like how you deal with hard situations, but then this like idea comes to me that there is no probably like formula you can follow. You have to like look at each equation differently, because each scenario is often different. Like if you have one difficult person who is maybe souring the mood in the room, it can be of so many reasons. How you deal with that, or do you have any like thoughts on this? How when it's hard, you feel your inner voice saying that, man, this sucks. This is like really difficult now.
You don't always have like a solution like at the moment, but I think that like when I think back of some experiences or moments where like I've done something stupid, or somebody else has like done something that might be kind of destructive or not destructive to the situation, sometimes it's just like you're in a state of shock and you don't know quite what to do. But then it's important, I think, to kind of like stay with it and try to understand, like, how you feel about the situation, how I feel about the situation, how others feel about the situation, and to like be open about it. The worst thing I think is to sweep things under the carpet and like pretend like they never happen. But then, you don't want to open things up in like an accusatory way,
Right.
or like to like say, okay, you're an asshole, why'd you do this? But like there's a problem, there's a question, there's something that needs to be opened up, to be resolved, in some kind of a dialogue on this there's something kind of in the way of the next step. There's something kind of, and let's see if we can learn from this. If you try and learn from it, if you try and understand it, then hey, that's great. But you're not everybody, and me included, is always capable of like understanding and accepting things at the moment that they happen, or even later, because we all have probably all of us have our own like hang-ups and our own kind of like things that we're sensitive to and that are difficult to deal with, or
only human after all.
Yeah, we're all insecure, but we're all insecure about something. I hope I'm not the only one.
Yeah, busted. No, truly, that is. I agree. We there was this IwIP question still I had in mind. Like, you now addressed what it meant to you then and how it was then, but how is it like now after 20 some years of this? What does IwIP mean to you today, to Alex?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like I think since I came to Finland, I didn't bring it here. Emilia Sarkola brought it here when she like studied in Prague, and she's this like Swedish bilingual director, but she's like also in the Swedish speaking community, and so she had these performances and with Eva Muilu and others who like developed this like as a like artistic like method in a way, or you could use it in the arts. And then when I came around the time when she was working with it, and she was the artistic director at Takamo, and I was like, hey, can I do this workshop? And we knew each other from before, and she's like, yes. And then I kind of brought it over here, but then I started to like run into a little bit like kind of like challenges or problems, and I started teaching at THEAC, at the Department of Drama and Theater Pedagogy, and then there were also like issues, and they had to do with like my own like teaching and my own teaching style, but also I just had like kind of taken what Fiskachil had given and more or less like kept it in that way. And then I basically, through discussions with lots of like really helpful colleagues there at THEAC and elsewhere, I was like, there's something like, why not like change this a little bit? Why not like develop it? Why don't we kind of like modernize it? Because it was created in a sense in the 80s in communist Czechoslovakia, and it was about like, it's like the themes are still like relevant. I think that in some ways I could dare to say universal, but it was like from 40 years ago in a different culture. So I was like, okay, how can I like modernize this and develop it? So to me, it's become this thing that I've been able to like, also away from the Czech Republic, away from like the like control center, and I might say, like, I've had this space to like kind of go my own way with it and develop my own way, not on my own only, but with these like other students and colleagues, to develop like different ways of teaching it. So some of the different variants we did in class, these kind of things, or just the pedagogy where, okay, it's not just student goes, teacher reflects, student goes, teacher reflects, student goes, that there's other ways of kind of structuring the pedagogy, and like maybe having like a support discussion group we have. So like on one hand, it's like for me this space where I could like develop as a teacher and develop the discipline. It's also been really nice because we've been doing it here for so long that it's also been a way of like developing a community that like is interested in this. Some people are like, what is IwIP? It's so weird. I still don't understand it. It's like a cult. And we're like, no, it's not a cult. You can come and go whenever you want. You don't have to give me any money. You don't have to have sex with me. It's really not a cult. It's okay. It's just like, if you're interested in this, you do it. And if you're not, you leave. It's cool. And but there are people who voluntarily have been doing this for years, and they know each other, and it's a community. So it's like, in a sense, a nice way of, that we've created this community. And then also it's still a way that inspires me in terms of like acting, and recently in terms of writing. So like I've gone back to writing. So it's really like kind of can be found there in like the writing process.
Right. So it sounds like nowadays you get more from this community and teacher aspect of it. Or
Yeah.
you do still have some like this learning journey about yourself.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I go twice a week, twice a month. Sorry, twice a month. Class is led by Hanna Raiskenmäki, and she's like been studying it for ages too here with me, and then like now she's leading classes too, and so I get to go there, and it's wonderful because it's great to have her feedback and support, and then I constantly, not constantly, but I discover things about myself and get reminded of of old things, and it's a really nice way. It's a way. What is it? It's not like a technique so much. It's like a way of like researching through performance, researching through play. Learning about yourself, experimenting, and so in a sense, it's like therapy. Technically, therapy could go on your whole life too.
It's a bit of therapy with yourself, I think, and this ties somewhat into the how it started in the 80s and how you tried to use this static version of the discipline, and it didn't work, so you started changing it.
Yeah.
So like life is not static; it is like dynamic.
Yeah.
Things change, and if you're not changing, something is probably off.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that you're still also in your own sessions exploring and finding new things.
Yeah.
If you would say now that I found it all, I know it all, that's probably not true. Because it's changing.
It is
in every moment.
And Viscocho often always said that it's like his version isn't the definitive version, and he is very open not to make it like a fixed thing.
Good.
But like out of tradition, there was like a kind of like a practice that was like repeated. There were some small variations and plays with it, but also what was really good is he was personally very encouraging to me to like do it here and to develop it. But just he wants it to like develop. He wants it to like. Develop, and so I think that he's such a secure person that he's not like threatened by it as somebody might be like, no, this is mine, this is how you do it, don't fucking touch it. He's like, no, it's like the principles are there, I guess the principles are there, and I don't think you could fundamentally change those because they're so basic and in a way simple. And if you lose those, then it's about really something else. But then, like the way you approach those principles, that can change.
Right. I think we could talk about IwIP a lot more, but could also cover some other things.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
I don't know how wise I am about other things.
Yeah,
but that's okay. I can be stupid for a while too.
And I think like IwIP connects to a lot of things. You talk about society a little bit, and you have experience of Czech society and Finnish society, and also the States, which are all quite different. But before there, I actually had this question about your time as you started to learn to do this by yourself, this IwIP. What sort of mistakes would you say that did you make that you have learned from, and as you started developing as
like a practitioner, as like a student, you mean?
Student or teacher, because they are often quite interesting ones. That like the things that you maybe thought this is how it goes, but then you learn that damn, that was a mistake. And is there any such moments that come out to you?
Yeah, I think that like in the arts we like to say that mistakes are very welcome.
Yeah.
Failure is fail again. This kind of it sounds like some sort of mantra nowadays, but it's true in a way. And I think one of my earliest kind of realizations that things were not as I thought they were was when I discovered that that IwIP is not just about learning to be an actor, which I thought it was. I thought it was like going to help me become a great actor. I think it helped, but it was not like enough in a way. It wasn't like I couldn't just become an actor by studying this one discipline. And Viscocho also has other courses in the program, but like I said, his is not like an acting program in the traditional sense. So then I realized I had to do other things and learn other things and practice other skills in order to learn how to act in like a kind of
fair enough,
like craft sense.
I was maybe thinking about when you said that things went wrong in the beginning. You had something about your teaching was not like
that
was
teaching,
rubbing people the wrong way. What was that like? What did you learn?
I think I learned in the teaching thing. There was, first of all, sometimes the shit that comes out of my mouth is stupid and could be like offensive, and I think that I learned I have to be a little bit more aware of that.
Like some filter a bit.
Yeah, some filter to like, that what I could say, it's not a question of being politically correct, it's just a question of being like nasty or inappropriate. And I guess I didn't notice that it was really not so constructive, like to this atmosphere, like what I'm talking about. And so I was like, okay, now I know this about myself a little more. And so kind of like a filter that like if I kind of hear that like something might be coming out, I can sort of say, wait a second, this is probably not appropriate. And so maybe let's not like introduce it into the situation.
I can imagine your days from debate team and being like quite quick to say can play a role.
I think I'm an impulsive person. I can be quite impulsive and like a little mischievous, and so I like to like cause problems. But then in certain situations when you're teaching and you're trying to like create a nice situation, it's not so constructive,
Not
I
at
don't
all.
think so, no. So I was like, okay, that's one thing. And then I think that like there is something great about the structure of IwIP, that it's like a teacher and it's kind of individual work and there's not all this group talk, and like, in the arts there's often these like, we have to talk about everything and reflect. And that's really good, and I like it sometimes, but sometimes it creates a lot of problems too. It becomes like these unconscious like ego competitions, who says what, how do you affect other people. It has good things too, but then that kind of like approach in the arts and arts pedagogy is so dominant often, these kind of like group discussions, that I was like, it's a nice counterbalance to have this where there's not a group discussion. But then I realized that it's all one-sided in IwIP, that it's like just this like voice of God, giving feedback on the students, and nobody else gets to say anything, not even really ask questions so much. I was like, this is not, let's open the space up. So I started to say, okay, let's have people give each other reflections. What's the worst thing that can happen? Let's have little discussions once in a while. Let's try other ways where the kind of group dynamics are worked with, not necessarily in discussions, but in other ways. And my focus when I did like a research project, I got a grant from Suomen Kulttuurirahasto to like research performative well-being.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was this term I came up with, which I was like, okay, this will get me a grant.
Is that well-being on stage or in life?
I think it's good. It could be both. It's like this, like how well-being itself is a performative thing, but also like how we are when we are in front of other people in life on stage. And so, I got this grant, and I was like, okay, I got like a year, and I can mess with the pedagogy. I can experiment with different things. And we had like two groups, one this experienced group of IwIPers and a new group. And so it really helped me kind of like try different things. And some of the things were, boring and not so interesting, but some were like, like some of these exercises that we did were developed like through that. So
now that you say this, like that's a good lesson, I think, that you notice that there's an unbalance in how you discuss in a group, and you fix that balance.
Yeah, I don't know if I fixed it, but I responded to it.
Yeah, you're trying out new different things, and my mind jumps to like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is similar to this, because the point of going to the practice is actually to be on the mat and wrestle, whereas the point in IwIP is just to get on the stage. That is where you get the main thing. Yeah. But there's a bit of like tension to do it, because you don't maybe want to go to the stage always, because it's going to feel difficult and you're going to get your ass kicked sometimes, but that's why you're there, to do it. So I feel the same way in this Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Often when you get to practice, you kind of want to discuss and talk, because that's a safe space. You don't really want to go to the mat so fast, because that's where the difficult, hard lessons are learned. So it's easy to stay and discuss for too long, because then you can, I don't know, say this and that, and maybe this tutorial and that, and then you're missing the point. And in IwIP also, I feel like we had some with when you weren't there one time, we had with Vesa, and we started out talking, and we talked for maybe 40 minutes before we got to the point of doing the IwIP. And it's a situation.
Yeah.
So it's easy to go overboard on the talking when the point of being there is actually doing.
Yeah. Well, in like, when I started like doing this more traditional theater stuff,
Yeah.
We would spend most of our time like rehearsing, doing the thing over and over and over again. And then of course the director or somebody else would give you some feedback. But the idea wasn't that they would give you like a speech, they would like, sometimes it could be really short, or like, sometimes you talk about things. But you learn through doing things, and of course discussing and talking. It's a kind of doing too, and it can be really important. I don't want to like demonize it, but
Case in point, what we're doing right now, we're
exactly.
just talking. It's nothing else.
Exactly. But but it's also doing something, and that's okay too. I mean, it's not IwIP now. I mean, it might have aspects of IwIP to it.
Yeah.
When we say something funny or stupid or whatever.
Yeah. I feel I have this notion of a meditative state that you can get into sometimes.
Yeah.
If you do yoga, say for 40 minutes, and you
Okay.
feel like, wow, I'm really aware now. I'm really like present in the moment. And then you go about your day and you lose that state, and you're not aware anymore. But I have this notion that you can develop that, how fast you can get into that awareness by just maybe you become used to getting into that. So just with a few breaths you can, all right, now we're like back in the moment.
Right.
And I say I have a notion of it because I haven't like managed this myself, but I hear people talking about it.
Right. No nirvana yet.
No nirvana yet. No, I'm really crossing my fingers here. But I think I would sort of like that. That sometimes when I've been home alone,
Okay.
and I sort of like, let's pretend now that I jump into a IwIP session, and what happens? And then I like it sort of happens by itself, that this state of mind, because I know it can be created, it then happens
Okay.
also.
Nice.
So
And what happens when you do that?
I usually laugh a lot. But it's usually just random stuff. I don't know. Often like this kung fu moves. I don't know. It depends.
Right.
But it's like this. You said that this is similar to IwIP, and that's what I caught on to. That like you can in real life take aspects of this IwIP scenarios and just be aware maybe.
Yeah. I think it
And
like kind
say
of.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. It starts integrating into you in different ways. I think, like, for example, in the capacity to listen, when you're, not only when you go on stage, but, you have to watch 6 other people go.
Yeah.
And so you also have to kind of practice this capacity to pay attention to other people. And it might be like initially, especially if you're not a teacher, like I don't think it's boring, but like I can imagine like another student would be like, what the hell are these people? What is she doing? What is he doing? He's just standing there, and Alex is so interested in it, and this is so boring. Like, initially it might feel like that. But then after a while you're like, oh look, he's doing that again, and oh look, oh look, this is so, and then you start like, understanding the person and being able to empathize with them. And that's also what Visculture talks about, this like this wishful attention, that we can have like a wishful attention, like curiosity, interest, listening up to other people and see what they're like, and that's really important for like the dialogue, that you can like, not only can you like give offers like in IwIP and in life, but then also you're able to accept them. Then you're like, okay. Otherwise it's just like a one-sided, monologue.
And by accepting offers, you mean like you get these internal offers all the time. Do this, impulses maybe.
Yeah.
And we're quite accustomed to saying no.
Yeah.
And just be controlled, don't do that, don't do this. So it's nice to notice that you can say yes. And a key word you said was like some empathy.
Yeah.
I feel that's very, like I really feel like towards the end of the course I could have so much empathy to the one on stage. Because when you're sitting there and you don't feel the energy that they are feeling in their chest and in their whole being.
Yeah.
Just like looking at a crowd of 10 people looking at you, and you're like, wow, I just want to turn my back and not face that thing.
Yeah.
It's so intense once you're there. But when you're sitting on like this and looking, it's like, what are you stressing about? This is nothing. But I have such an empathy for the inner world of people. Maybe that has been developed a little bit from this IwIP.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
session.
Yeah, you're all in the same shoes in some ways, the like students. You all have to, like, you experience the shoes differently, But you know, for some people the shoes might be big, some might be small, tight, whatever. But
Yeah.
you know, you all go through the same thing, and the teachers have also, you know, they don't do it during the class, but all the teachers who teach it, or leaders, or whatever you want to call them, they've all done it. You know, they've all, like, we've been there. I've been there too. I still do it. So it's, you know,
I really had to bite my tongue many times during the class.
Why?
Because it's something like, it's so horribly awkward what something is happening on stage.
oh,
And
but
you're saying
somebody else does it.
somebody else does it. And
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm not supposed to laugh. But then I like, and then towards the end, maybe we started laughing more towards
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things. At the beginning, it was like, a couple of times I've been really, really.
But that's
trying hard
great.
not
That's
to laugh.
also great about these things is that you know, you learn to be able to laugh at yourself, and you learn to laugh at other people, but like with them, not like
Agreed.
at
Agreed.
them, but like, you know, it's like you're having fun with them, so the laughter is part of their like work. It's part of their play, and
Yeah.
that's like this dance. That's like this like nice time where, you know, you can take things seriously on one hand, but also you don't have to take things too seriously. You don't have to take yourself too seriously.
Yeah. It's such a fine line, that laughing at someone and with someone.
Sure,
I
yeah.
feel it looks so similar, but you feel the difference if you're in that situation.
Yeah.
I think easily. Yeah, I'm glad I took this course. I hope it will like be, yeah, it's such a like different from normal university studies. This very focus on being on stage, and I have all my other courses are very, you know, scientific maybe.
Right.
But
And it's like what I wanted to ask you is, if I could, it's like, you know, you seem quite like interested in IwIP and these like questions that it provokes, and then it was so nice that you like, you know, wanted to do this talk with me.
right.
But would you tell me a little bit more about, like, you know, what, if you know, like, or what you know, not if you know, but what you know about like your, you know, what's your like need, or what's your motivation to like, you know, like pursue it? I mean, is like, you asked me like, you know, why did I do this IwIP, you know, and this like that, like, what is it that like draws you to it, or keeps you in it, or interests you?
I think that's a good question, and primarily I think it comes from like my core value of not maybe going where it is comfortable, but going where I can grow. Like one of my I would say core values is to try to grow as a person, in like whatever that might be, and in this specifically when I went to this course, I had in mind this 20-hour rule, where if you haven't done something, the first 20 hours you do it, the learning curve is very steep. There's so many new impressions, so many new ideas, and so much to learn from in general.
Okay.
So I was like, I've never done improvisation. I've never done theater really in that sense since I was 10 or 12 in school.
Mm-hmm.
But I always liked it. So it's like, nice. This is an opportunity for that, for growth and for this steep learning curve, and that's what I did it. Then this, as it happened, I thought that it was just improvisation as entertainment.
Yeah.
That we were gonna do like stand-up comedy maybe.
Yeah,
type
or
of thing.
improv games or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it was this totally different thing, where it's like psychoanalysis combined with this on stage being, and that happens to be another interest of mine, like psychology and how do we work, how do I work, how do humans work, what is cognition, what are we?
Right.
It's fascinating, and then it just turned out to be much better than I expected. This
Remember, you talked about not having expectations before we started this interview.
right. So I had many expectations.
Okay, yeah, you said, but that's good. You're aware of them.
And that's a good point. Like the expectations usually fuck you over. They usually make reality something it is not.
But you're aware of them, which is great. Like that, you know, you were able to like, you know, dive into it like this. And
yeah, but they can be good if your expectations, if reality is better than your expectations, then you get a real dopamine kick and wow, that was nice, which happened now.
yeah,
But then if you have, say, some really high expectations and reality doesn't meet to those expectations, then you feel like depressed and wow, this is not interesting.
yeah, could happen.
And that's like the real risk of expectations, I feel like. but that's what my motivation for the course.
That's great.
And also I think you as you're an interesting teacher, so that's why I thought this sort of conversation would be interesting to do, because I've only done it with people my age, for example.
Now you're like, okay, there's this old fart. He's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It is interesting to hear, because you have such a more experience just from life in general.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, thanks. That's one way to put it. But it's really nice, because I think like what you say about your motivations and your like values and the way that you like approach things, I think that's, you know, that's really important if you have that for this discipline. But it also, I think Viskochill, like in a sense, tries to, through the discipline, kind of help provoke that in people. Because people often, like, they want to go someplace and they want to learn how to do something.
Right.
You know, they want like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then it's going to give me this. And that's really important. We need those things in life. We need these like very kind of technical, you know, it's very helpful. It's very practical. But then it's like about something else. And so what I think IwIP kind of provokes or could provoke is this kind of, are you willing, are you interested in like, you know, experimenting, in like entering a situation where you don't know what the answers are going to be, where you don't know what this is even for maybe. You know, you know, do you have like, what's your curiosity? What's your own motivation to do this? And there have been like many students who, you know, don't, you know, they get that message in a way, consciously, I don't know, but they get the message that, hey, you're not going to learn A, B, C steps how to do something. It's not going to like, in like, you know, 5 steps teach you how to be a good performer or give better presentations. I can teach you how to do that, but that's a different course.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what's interesting, because then like it offers to people like, this is kind of how this works. It's like, you know, walking through a forest and you don't know where the path is, but you could find a path. But you might take you a little while. And some people are not into that. But at least they've had the opportunity to like see the potential of like a nice kind of wandering through the woods, you know. But some people like, I'd rather just leave and go around the woods.
Yeah.
But that's okay too. And that's like, everybody has their own kind of, and it changes in life. Somebody might have that like at the beginning in their life, but then in the end it might change. They might be more interested in going into this metaphorical forest, which I've attached myself to this metaphor.
Exploring
but
the
it's
unknown.
Finland, so forest is like a good metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There are many paths in the forest, and everyone can take their own sort of.
Yeah.
There is no correct one.
No.
But yeah, like this, I was trying to think like, what have I learned from this IwIP course? And I wouldn't say I've become better at improvising, like, but more maybe this some more information about myself. Just
Good.
maybe not even understanding, but just see like, I have this type of thing and this that. But it's been like, for sure, energized my days this fall, since
That's
I've
great.
I don't have any other lectures or nothing. I've just been writing my thesis, and it's quite like monotone. And then you have this energizing
Yeah, that's great.
things every now and then. It's been good.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning it's like, you know, if you are, like, from my own experience at least, and from what I've seen with others, if you're just kind of like, it really helps if you're interested in that way of working, and if you still have some, like, you're aware of some motivation, or you're becoming aware of some motivation or some questions that like interest you, and you're like, oh, okay. And it doesn't always have to be, and this is also like, I think, very much part of creative process, it could be a little bit intuitive at the beginning and just like emotional, and then there's kind of like, it becomes more conscious and more like articulated and more rational, like a little bit later on. You can't always like, I think certain things like, yeah, it takes a while to kind of rationally like articulate, okay, this is why I'm doing it, this is the reason, you know, this is sometimes just like, you know, gut instinct, and one step at a time, and then at some point it like clicks maybe.
Yeah, it takes time for it to click, for
Yeah.
your brain to adjust, and what is this, what's happening.
Yeah.
What is so? Did you have to leave at 4?
What time is it?
1:45.
I kind of have to leave actually at 5, but if you
At
want
5.
to, you want to take a little break now, or
We could take a little break. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And we're back.
We're back.
Right, and we're back. And going away from IwIP, at some point you mentioned to me that you have this digital, you avoid screens in the morning time, right?
Well, now I've tried to sequester myself, like in all ways, in the mornings to write. So I think part of like the thing with any creative process, and I think especially for me because I'm coming back to the writing and it's so fresh, it's really great, like with IwIP, to have some like discipline, to have some like say, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like I don't know if it's the right time yet, but I'm gonna do this every day from like around 10 to around 12 or 1, and so I'm going to not turn off my phones, not open my email. Sometimes I type on the computer, so like I do look at a screen, but it's like not connected to the real world. I say I'm not going to do any web searches. Most I'll look in the dictionary, but I do also try to, like, I'm a little bit of a fascist with my son about like screen time. At least that's what he thinks. My dad is a fascist about screen time.
Yeah, it might be good.
So I guess but then we were just talking about computer games during our break, and I also, grew up a little bit on, the first computer games. Oh my God.
Yep.
And these kind of things. And I do also do a little bit of that, not so much, but
Not in the morning.
not in the morning. Not in the morning. Usually after lunch.
Right. Has this been at all transformative? Has it helped you?
I think that the lure of these screens, these games, just like this connectedness, is that it like constantly stimulates you, it constantly connects you, and I think there's something old school but something really great about being bored and disconnected for a while.
Amen.
And just like what. And that's what, like, my son still doesn't. Well, he's learning this, but I think that he, doesn't. He's learning the point of, like, what's the point of being bored, But we have like no screen time on Sundays, the whole family. Sometimes we watch a movie at night, but generally speaking, nobody plays any games. His phone is only for communication with his buddies. But then after a while, you see that, like, he starts to kind of get bored for a little while, but then he like picks up a book, or he like goes to the piano, and nobody has to tell him to do it. He just kind of like finds it himself. And I think that, like, when we're always connected, whether it's through this technology or otherwise, it's hard to kind of find the like emptiness and what comes into the emptiness.
Yeah, and a framework to think about it is like dopamine, what you get when you feel good. This chemical that also affects our motivation to do things, because you're going to feel good if you do that. That's why you do it.
Yeah.
So our phones and all these entertainment systems is all geared for dopamine release.
Yeah.
So it might look that you're living a very balanced life. You're like, hey, I watch my phone every now and then, I play some games, I party in the week, and then I train hard and I do all these things. When in reality, it's sort of like being addicted to dopamine all the time. Because you're constantly spiking this internal dopamine system by every time you refresh your phone and check the Facebook feed or play the game. So once you don't have that, your baseline of dopamine is much lower than it otherwise would be, which means a state where you're like in low dopamine, you feel anxious, you feel like dopamine depressed. It's not a nice state, so you constantly want to spike it again. And that's I think what many in modern society have, I think, is this like dopamine addiction that takes form in different ways. Like you're not bored, so you're kind of have like this ADHD symptoms, because you're used to constantly getting this spike. So you can't, if you're not getting it, you're not going to move to the next thing. And we misdiagnose it as ADHD, because it's like, if you look at the stats, I think like ADHD has been rising. The amounts of prescriptions for this has like been rising steadily since the 90s. But I doubt that we humans have changed at all. It's all these phones and all these dopamine-inducing factors have become so prevalent in our lives. And that's just like an interesting way to think about it, I think. That it looks like you're doing different thing, but in reality you are spiking the same like sort of hormone or dopamine chemical. It's like a drug you take. It's just I wanted to get this out of the system.
Yeah, well, I feel you, and it's interesting how you like you can sense that it like does it bother you? Does it like I had two questions, like if it bothers you, and is it something, because I'm an old fart already, so like do you see it in your in your generation, and do you see its effects? Like how do you see it?
Yeah, I think it affects a lot. As it's like if you value life experience, doing things maybe, then this sort of very small dopamine hits you get from watching a phone or playing a game or scrolling a feed, they're so easy to get and not very experience heavy. I don't think you get much like experience from those moments.
You gotta like get my son to listen to you, so it's not just me. This is great. I think that's like one thing that, like, for example, we talk about with my son. I hope he doesn't mind. I'm talking about him. I'm not trying to demonize him, but but the thing is like, that's what we say, that if you're on your phone, doing whatever, you're not doing something else. You're not like, it's not rocket science. I mean, if whatever you're doing, you're not doing the other thing. But like you're saying, the phone, I guess it depends, and there's probably something good in it, and you can learn things, and you are like communicating with your friends, and nowadays, when I was a kid, we would call each other up, and like in New York City, it was great because it was a local call. You could talk for as long as you want. You could talk for 2 hours. It cost 10 cents, and for like you could talk to 8 million people like that.
It's kind of similar to the balance you talked about in IwIP. This. That you should discuss and also do. And you notice that in theater, in general, people discuss maybe too much. So you found there's an imbalance. So of course there is value to discuss, but you got to find like what are we doing too much of. And in today's society, I think we do way, way, way too much of the dopamine, small effect of dopamine. And you also said, I think you put it just bang on the button, how you get bored, and that's a good thing. Because if you normally go and play the piano, you play it for a little while and then you get bored and do another thing. With your phone, you don't get bored in that sense. You just go maybe switch an app, or you can just keep getting these small hits, and you don't get the cue that should be there that says, hey, go do something else. Yeah. And then 4 hours went by.
Yeah, and then that's like adults, and like think of like children.
Yeah.
Think of teenagers who don't have the life experience, who don't have the, who have just a different biology, who have a different, like, they haven't like internalized discipline, self-discipline in the same way. And then how do you create that discipline? So, you have these apps that, can control the phone, and we do that with our child, and some people do it with their children, but I think a lot of people don't, or they're extremely lenient, and they just like let the children give, I think, in a sense, like, it's like when from my age perspective, it's like we're all walking around with like, TVs. We're all walking around with like, movie theaters in our pockets. It's like that was unheard of in our day and age. We had like, the first video VCR I saw was Beta. It was like a Sony Beta. It was this huge chunk of plastic. You pushed into the thing. You pushed the thing down. The lid down. There was this like analog counter.
How old are you, Alex, by the way?
I was born in 1974, so I'm 47.
47.
So I saw Star Wars, on a Beta cassette when I was like, 8 or something, or 6 or something, 8 maybe. And then I saw Empire Strikes Back in the theaters. This is my American, cultural references. But and then when I was like a kid, they started to have these little like portable TVs, these black and white, kind of with an antenna that the doormen in the buildings, they would plug in, and they would watch like whatever, some stupid TV show.
Yeah.
But like to think that you can watch it on a bus, that, you know, I had to go on a bus and I had to look at other people. You know, I had to look at other people and be like, ooh, this guy's ugly, or like, ooh, she's cute, or like, you know, ooh, this guy's weird. You know, you had to like interact. You had no choice. I mean, you could read a book. Books are a little different, but you know, it was like you were a little bit more like out in your world. I have a feeling. Maybe it's just me, but
there's this interesting line of argument that says that people have always said this with all new inventions, like when books became mainstream, like people are just going to read their books, and then when television came, people are just going to watch television, and now it's
they do.
and yeah, that's the point. It's like it really had an immense effect.
But yeah, the guy who invented the television apparently said later that he regretted that he invented it.
Yeah,
that's what I've heard. I think he was he Russian? I don't know, but and there's no reason. There's, you know, why do they call it the boob tube? You know, like you're a boob watching. Of course, there's great stuff on TV, and like there's also, it's a very interesting medium, and you know, nowadays, you know, everybody's like, but I think that I like you know, I like people. I like being with other like humans in the same space, or like relatively in the same space.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, my father, he's still alive, but he was very extroverted, extremely social person. And so even when he would go to a shop, he would like, you know, start a conversation and like, you know, just say nicely to some cashier. He'd be like, you have a lovely smile. You know, he wasn't hitting on her. He would just like...
That's his way of being. Was he from the States?
No, he's from Slovakia.
Slovakia.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, my mom, psychoanalyst, she's also like, you know, she spent like intimate times with people all the time. And then of course it's like great to watch TV and go to movies and play these games. But I don't know how, like, if I could handle it all without the reward of being with other people.
Yeah, I hope people are noticing this, and I hope that the pendulum is now like swinging back. We have been way too much screen heavy, and now it's like, okay, let's tone it down a bit. But I'm not sure. I don't know if people think this way.
I don't know. I think that like it's hard to say. It's hard for me to say. Like, we don't have a TV in our house.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law, he came over with his family, and he said, "This is like, I haven't seen a living room, olohuone ilman televisioita, in a long time, you know."
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh, really?" I mean, we watch like on a computer, you know, we like plug into that world.
Yeah, same actually.
But we don't have like this, like, you know, honorary spot for the television altar in the living room, which always attracts attention, and you have to burn the incense and pray and bow down to the television before you turn it on.
Yeah, it's
It'd be great if people actually did that, then they would see the significance. But I don't know if I'm sounding like an old fogey and critical, but it's also important to be like, I think you have a good point. It's important to be like critical about these things and aware of these things, and it's good I'm not the only one bringing it up.
Yeah, I've heard it with other people. It's not like unheard of, but we'll see how it goes. It just touches upon an interesting point of current society, I think, that we have so many like challenges facing humanity like ever before. Really, we can for the first time, like we don't mess it up for our own tribe, but we can mess it up for the whole planet, or we can mess it up for everyone, and we really need to play our A game. And at the same time, we have this insane distraction media that is constantly pulling at our sleeves and making like maybe making people miss out on growth opportunities a lot. But also it's not totally bad. You can via the internet get so much stimulation and information and all this stuff.
True, yeah.
So it has it's a double-edged sword.
Indeed it is.
But
it does like slightly depress me to think about these things, and and I feel a little bit sort of powerless in some ways, because you know, these things that require change, like this, like, you know, screen issues or these you know, environmental issues, I don't really believe they can be of such significant like impact unless it's like done on a social scale. Like I don't think that, like, you know, individual like actions here or there, of course they're important, but I think they're kind of like drops in the puddle. And yes, the drops will, like, gather and all this. But by the time that happens, there won't be any water in the pond anymore, So you need somebody to go in there with a bucket, and just like scoop out the water or dump the water in, on a large scale. That's sort of my perspective. So I hope that, that it happens like on a like more social. I'll tell you an interesting anecdote, if I may, briefly.
Right.
At the beginning of school, there was a WhatsApp group for my son and parents. WhatsApp parents.
He's first grader, or what?
No, this is a sixth grader.
All right.
I also have a second grader. And I was like, hey, so I just wanted to ask, before the school year starts, maybe it was before the school year started.
Is it with
early.
the students and parents?
No, it's just the parents.
Thank God.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, so could I ask, like, what your guy, how you guys, like, what's your screen time policy with your kids? Because, my son gives me a lot of crap, and I wonder, like, how other parents do it. And two other parents out of, like, 30 responded.
Two. And everyone else was then silent.
Completely silent. So it could be that they hate me. It could be they think I'm annoying. Could be they were still on vacation. I don't know. But one guy responded and one woman responded on how they deal with their screen time in their family. But nobody else was even wanting to say or ask or even said, no, I don't want to discuss this. This is like a personal thing. It was just ignoring.
I can relate to that maybe in a way, because group chats can be anxiety-inducing. It's a different than a group discussion, because then it's you can discuss and you can maybe recognize how the others are reacting and maybe explain. But in a group chat, it's so definitive.
I see,
and you get this back and forth easily that leads to maybe misunderstanding.
That's true. Yeah.
But your question was one very honest and I think a good one. Fascinating that they didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, but that's when you say people. That's what I'm saying is that you're saying you hope people are noticing it, and I think we all hope that if there's an issue that it's dealt with. But then when people ignore it, you're like, then it's when you're like, uh-oh.
I feel quite passionately about it actually, that this. When you want to see big change in society, like this, say, screen time and how much people spend on entertainment versus on different things. If you think about it in a way, it's we have to make politics and we have to make these grandiose changes, and then it gets so difficult. I can't wrap my head around that. But what I can wrap my head around is this drops in the pond, as you mentioned. I think that if you can light this fire in someone else and they in turn can spread it, it can be quite fast, and just network effects can spread it so fast to a great amount of people. And if you sort of try your best to light this fire in yourself primarily, and then you maybe in others, and then it bounces back on you, because next time you meet them they're maybe in a better mood because they have been spreading this. It's a attractive idea, at least, and also so easy to act upon. This, it's so right now in every moment you can act on yourself and try to be that in yourself, and versus this big changes we need to make, the decision makers do this or do that. I think the easier way to change is in yourself and in your networks. And I think that can be insane change also.
Yeah, I think there's something to some merit in that. I think that for sure, if you change it in yourself and if you can affect others in this individual way, at the same time, I don't know. I think that there's something even with IwIP, that which is one emphasis or one change I made over the time, is that it's not so in a sense just individually centered on the person there, but also the question of how even the individual's development is affected by the other people in the group. How the group dynamics, the group atmosphere, how what we do together really affects each other quite a bit.
Yep.
And in a sense, in that class or in that work, it's organized. I organize it in a certain way. And I organize the group to do certain things, to help each other, to support each other. And so I guess like philosophically or like politically or both, I kind of try. I see your point, and I believe in it. But I also like on another level, I think that like the most interesting things, whether or not they're like big changes or sea changes, they've come about because like people have organized something. I don't necessarily mean like you have to organize a union or something like that, but like, you know, it could be the opposite of a union. It could be like a fascist conspiracy, but they like happen because they're organized. They like start like making impacts because they're organized, that people like consciously work together to like organize something.
Right.
So, but I think that like it is harder. It is harder. Like you said, it's easy to do this, like what you suggested. And it you know, it does require like, and I'm not so often like good with like going like I should like do like more political stuff, I think, and you know, but I say, okay, my active organizing is like this like IwIP and this community and, you know, these like other cultural events that happen, you know, but it would be nice if like, you know, I could find like, sometimes I wish I could find some sort of like an organization or like a structure that was also like, that I could feel comfortable or just fucking do it. Just go in there and like, you know, contribute with other people. Like Finland has this really nice, this talkoot.
Yeah, true.
You know, this talkoot, and like, you know, we have it, I'm a member of this Tuovain Purssiseura, which is like this kind of like old school working class like boat club. It's pretty interesting. It's like anti-posh. And but you know, there too there's this talkoot. You know, so it's a very nice, I think, tradition of, you know, loosely organized. It's volunteer, you know, maybe there's some social pressures involved. But then, like, you know, then the shit gets done. You know, then it's like, you know, all the like leaves get raked, and like, you know, the gravel from the winter gets swept up and dumped in the thing, and
true.
And I don't know. There's something I kind of like about it, and I don't know what it means. You know, maybe it means like, in terms of screen time or something like that. I don't know what it means.
I can't fathom either how you would go about. But there is like a lot of value there, just getting people together, and now we have this talko, we're gonna work on this together, and then they spend time together, because we're so, in some ways, like shut off from each other. Everyone lives in their own house with their own lives, and then you don't necessarily know what other people's are like, truly how they are, because we don't spend that much time maybe together.
Yeah.
And it's also nice to not spend time with everyone, because you know, but it's it's just this question of balance. I think we're doing too little of it.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
It's maybe a bit depressing, but hey, that's reality right now.
But it's like, it is sad, and that's important to like acknowledge it. But then, you know, if enough people get sad, then maybe something will happen. You know, it's like, maybe. You know, you go through this mourning, you go through this kind of like, and then maybe you get angry, maybe you get optimistic, maybe you know, find somebody who feels like similar to you, and you're like, hey, yeah, like, you know, in a network or in some sort of like a, like a organization.
Somebody once like described like when you see a problem, that is also like opportunity, and that's something that opportunity translates into energy. Like you see you can do something, and then the brain is like, hey, yes, you need energy to go and do this. This is a good thing in that sense. If you feel like this is something that is could be done better. Well, yeah.
I had a thought. It's interesting because, you know, we have these like often contradictory tendencies in us, and like it's interesting how you, and how I too. I don't know if I don't know you so well, but you know, on one hand, you're interested in this like individual growth and individual, like, you know, like process, but then, you know, so you're also very open, and you like, you know, opened up to me in this kind of like in a very collaborative way.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you at the beginning of our conversation, you talk about how like it's nice to like be with other people, how like these kind of, you know, group situations like give you something if I understood correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
But then at the same time, then we have these like contradictory, maybe, I don't know, like tendencies, like which I have too. Sometimes it's great not to be around other people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to be like on your own, and it's not like we have these different partners, these different like.
True. You have to be sensitive to those and how they are. I think this like individual growth and very individual focus is like been very. It's been modern society's norm. Hey, you are an individual and you can do for yourself and focus on yourself and go into yourself and meditate, and this has been all the hype, at least in many circles that I live in.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit too much even, like.
Yeah, I think so.
Because life it's not about yourself. It's being outside and in the world. So
yeah. Well, I remember one of the questions you said in the email. It reminded me of that. Like, what advice would you give to like 20-year-olds or something like that?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I think that like what I was thinking, I was like, oh shit, that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I can do that. But I think one thing that I kind of, being a very kind of self-centered, maybe slightly narcissistic person when I was like in my 20s, from having like had like finally a good relationship, like a partner and kids and stuff like that, and like looking back at all these like difficulties I've had in relationships with people, and also like in my own like pursuit of goals and stuff like that, you realize that like people make the world go round.
Right. Yeah.
It's like I don't think it's money. I mean that's part of it. But like if I had to go even like to find something more basic, it's like people make the world go round. Of course, like in our environment, if we kill all the trees, we're not going to be going around much ourselves anymore. But then if you like accept that premise, which is pretty simple, then you just got to deal with people. You got to deal with like yourself. You got to deal with people you don't like. You got to deal with people you don't agree with. If you want like to get something out of life, you need other people, and that's just the way it is. Like humans are so social, and that's like our intelligence. I read something about like the difference between Neanderthals and like Homo sapien, and they had bigger brains than us apparently, the Neanderthals.
I didn't know.
I think that's what the article said, if I remember. But the difference was, they think, is that like Homo sapien could like collaborate.
Yeah.
That they could like teach each other things, that they could be like, okay, this is a tool and this is how you make the tool. This is language, and you can communicate things to like after we're dead.
Yeah.
You can connect next generation. And these survival mechanisms that were basically, like we were talking about in the pizza store the other day, this collective, this like, so, yeah, I don't know. So I guess maybe also as like a counterpoint to like what you're saying is this like individualistic focus, which is in America, I think like extreme. I think like I haven't lived there for 20 years, but I think it's so like extreme here. There's more of a balance. That I think that's important to keep in mind. Like,
Holy Moses, that's a very good advice. I think it's really this people are it's a fact of life. You have to deal with people.
Yeah, well, it's people make the world go round.
Yeah, that's really good.
I mean, it's nothing like, I don't think it's genius. It's pretty obvious. But, maybe these like very simple things are nice to like, that's what I've kind of like learned, So how do I deal with the crazy person who's, harassing me on the bus, and how do I deal with this person I vehemently disagree with, like politically? How do I...
Especially those people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but, they're people too, unfortunately. They're around. It's not easy. But like my father and I, for example, we're polar opposites, like in everything, especially in terms of, let's say, philosophical, like political perspective.
Really?
Totally polar opposites.
Interesting.
He voted for Trump, for example.
Yeah, okay.
I did not vote for Trump.
Wow.
So that's like a very simplified way of putting it.
You can still vote in the States?
Yeah.
Even though you haven't lived there for such a long time?
Yeah, it's like distance voting.
Interesting.
Yeah. But like mail voting. Yeah, and that's different because it's my father, so it's like maybe a little more, there's lots of.
But you still get
baggage.
along.
No, we don't get along.
We don't get along.
We don't really talk, but it's not because of just the political philosophical things. There's other issues, but I guess the point is that I've had to learn to deal with that. Having somebody in my intimate circles, not very, we weren't so close ever, or maybe when I was quite young, but. So how do you come to grips with that? Or even like with interacting with your partner, there could be somebody in you who's, different partners that are very opposed to each other in some way. So you can destroy them. I guess that's one option. That's where evil comes from. That's where the Nazis came from, and a lot of these other horrible movements where you just destroy the other that you don't want to deal with. But if you don't want to destroy the other, then how do you live with them? I guess.
Yeah. And
have you seen this? There was I can do a little plug for it. I don't know if it's still happening, but there's a really interesting performance at Virus, actually Swedish, and I went there. They have Finnish subtitles, and you can have English subtitles on your phone. And
I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still on, but it's called Rocky the Loser. And it's very much about this, how do you deal with people that you don't agree with? How do you live with them? That's one of the basic themes, and it's a good show.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it reminds me of something my father has often said. You don't have to be friends with everyone, but you have to get along with everyone.
Yeah,
because it's in no one's benefit to not get along, because. Especially in say family, you can't get away from that.
You can't choose your family.
You can't choose. And some people, they are difficult, but you've got to try to get along. It's like making enemies makes nothing better. But it's so easy to do that, to take the high road and be like, fuck that person.
But I think that if I can make some generalization, I think Finns are good at that. I think Americans.
Yeah.
From what I read on the news and from what I hear, there's so much discord and animosity and not getting along over there. Yeah. Whereas here, maybe because of this consensus mentality and this the roots in agrarian culture, except maybe some elite groups, the Swedish speaking, maybe aristocracy or something like that. But there's generally speaking this consensus. We have to kind of survive up here, in the dark and the cold. And if we don't have the others there, then we're screwed. But then also there's this individual sisu, this you have to be able to manage. You have to do it yourself. But they're both there, and I think I like that a lot. I mean, I like that a lot, that there's this kind of it's such a small country, if you want to get along, it has its drawbacks too, but it's better to get along, at least not have other people don't hate other people, don't create too much animosity. You don't have to disagree with everybody.
Yeah, you don't have to agree. You don't have to be friends, but you don't have to be enemies either. What was it that came to my mind? This word, my favorite one. Comes to mind co-opetition, which I really enjoy using right now.
Co-opetition?
Co-opetition.
I've never heard that. That's great. You taught me a word.
It's compete and also cooperate at the same time. And it's with humans, we're very good at.
Yeah, that's great.
We have at the same time all these power dynamics between individuals, but we want to move forward as a group as well. And it's a good way to think about it, perhaps. You have now lived in New York and Helsinki a lot, and also in Czech. Where would you prefer? What is your take so far? What could maybe Finns do better?
Whoa, I don't know. I mean, my 8-year-old the other day in the car asked me. He's like, "Dad, if you could live anywhere, where would you live?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I don't know. It's a tough question because it depends what you're looking at." on one hand, I would love to live someplace where it's warm and sunny all the time. So if Finland could please do something about that would be really great.
Yeah.
Move the country 1,000 kilometers south, but maintain everything else. That would be.
That
good.
would be difficult, but global warming might
But
help.
I also think Sanna Marin could work on improving the weather in the winter. I think that there could be more light. I think there could be more. The winters could be colder down here. I think that the current government has a lot to do on that. In the short time they have ahead, it's a big task. Yeah, it's hard to say, like I've lived in 3 places and each one has its own, benefits and drawbacks. Each one gives you something. And then I think, after being around for 47 years, you also change a lot as a person. So you want different things I've wanted different things at different parts of my life. So I don't know. I like a lot of things besides the weather and the climate, which I've become, I've adapted to more or less here. I don't know if I have any. I think sometimes, which is also like good and bad. I think that, Finns have done, like they try hard to be like open and friendly, which is really good. I think that's like important, but I don't know if it'll ever reach the level of kind of casual friendliness that's in the States. I don't know if it needs to, but sometimes it's nice to like, go to a coffee shop and like your local coffee shop and you just have a chat with somebody. It doesn't really happen here. It doesn't happen to me so much, maybe because I'm not like so comfortable in but I think sometimes, and this is I guess the biggest double-edged sword, it's a very rule-based society here. It's which really makes things function, which makes things work really well. But sometimes it makes things a little bit boring. It makes people sometimes a little bit boring because they like have to follow the rules, and it's almost something that's like unquestioned. It's just like a given. And the Czech Republic is interesting because it's like not a Protestant country, or it was, but then it was like conquered by the Catholics.
Right.
But there was, and all the like, most of the aristocracy was like thrown out windows and hung and stuff like that. But it was a Protestant nation, and then it was like taken over by the Habsburgs, basically, for a long time, for 300 years. So there's this, and there was a really strong like Jewish community there as well for a long time before World War II. So, you have these different cultures. You had this kind of like Protestant, like in America, this kind of like rules-based kind of thing. They're like very like kind of. I always think of it as like you have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
But Catholics, again, it's a generalization. But in some of these like Catholic cultures, you'll be forgiven.
Yeah, fair enough.
Don't worry about it. You sin a little bit. Just come tell the priest. You'll be forgiven. I'm a baptized Catholic. So I can say, even though I'm not religious. I never practiced. But it's again, it's this sort of, it's such a simplification. But from my experience, I can say that there's rules in the Czech Republic, but sometimes you can like bend them. There's like personal exceptions due to like individual circumstances. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it leads to like corruption and like,
And it leads to, in Finnish you can put aivot narikkaan. You can put the brain like away. If you just follow the rules, this is how it's done. It's always been like that. You don't have to think about it.
Right.
It's a bit boring then.
Yeah, but on the other hand, at least you get like a kind of like well-run, well-organized, society that, it's safe and it's stable and you don't have to worry. So then you get benefits from that. Then you can have a little bit of risk.
It seems like
in other situations.
You like Prague and New York are such like rich countries. I feel I have never been to Prague, and I have this image in my head. And same with New York. I only visited once, and you have this like romantic view of both of them. So I suppose Helsinki is a bit more neutral in that sense. It is what it is.
Yeah, well, it's like I like Helsinki. I think that especially like the nature. It's not a big city. It doesn't have a big center. It never had like a huge population, and it's kind of isolated. I provoke my wife. I say, like Finland is great. It's like Western Russia. She gets really angry. And then I'm like, no, I'm sorry. It's not like Western Russia. It's like Eastern Sweden. And she's like, and she gets angry again.
Yeah.
But, that's what I joke to like provoke her. But it's hard. Finland is like kind of hidden on the northeast part of the Baltic Sea, so it's geographically, a little isolated. But I think considering that, Finland is a very like open place, and it's very like, I think, interested in like you're an example, of like interested in people who come here and in difference and in like learning from the rest of the world and being changed, and I think that's great because you could be in an insular, isolated geographic location and have that kind of a mentality too. But I don't think Finland has that kind of mentality. I think it has, generally speaking, an open mentality. Maybe because of this co-opetition, maybe with other Nordic countries, Baltic countries. Maybe that's part of it.
That's nice to hear from like that. You have this insider and outsider view of this because you still lived in Finland for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned we should stop strong when you do an improvisation. I don't know. This was a positive note.
Yeah, it was.
I think it could be a good way to end it. But where could people find you if they're interested in IwIP or your stuff here in Helsinki?
Yeah,
in
that's
Finland?
nice that you ask. We have like a non-for-profit yhdistys. How do you say it in Swedish?
Yhdistys.
In Swedish, you say förening.
Förening.
Yeah.
Förening.
Yeah, so it's
non-profit förening.
It's called Culture Current. Kulttuuriyhdistys Culture Current.
Cultura Current.
Yeah.
All right.
And so.
Hardcore name.
Culture Current. Yeah. Is it?
I feel like it's current, like electricity and cultura. It
right.
sounds. Yeah, well, that's my impression.
Good, Culture Current. Okay, so yeah, so they're that organizes courses that we teach and some of the shows that I do and other activities. And for example, next year we're doing this workshop for where members of our group have been working together and working with this IwIP for years in their own ways.
Yeah.
For example, choreographer Jenny Elena von Bach, she's like been working with choreography and dance. Hanna Raiskinmäki, she's an actress. She's been working with it. They have a show coming up in Takamo, actually. Then there's Cecilia Paul, who's actually a Swedish-speaking actress at the Svenska Teater. And then maybe some other person will join. And we have this core group, and we're going to have these like workshops for performing artists, but international performing artists. So we got these grants from Suomen Kulttuurirahasto, the Uusimaa. We got something from Svenska Kulturfonda, actually.
Nice.
From the city and from Taike. And the idea is to like kind of create like an international space where people who are living in Finland but maybe are not connected to these networks can like work with us and like find something fun to do for a little while.
Right, like workshops to do,
like
create something.
Yeah, to work to do IwIP and also things based on IwIP. And then we have another interesting project. This, like I mentioned to you, this artist talking that we're going to be interviewing in like artists, Finnish and Finnish speaking, Swedish speaking, and international artists in this gallery, like night, in Heitalahti.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so like if people are interested in IwIP, they can talk to you because you know something about it.
Yeah.
They can get in touch with me through the website. I don't do social media because I'm old and boring, but we have a new project manager, so hopefully he'll be doing the social media for Culture Current.
Yeah, I recall when I googled IwIP, it doesn't really come up so well.
No, it doesn't come up. No, there's actually an interacting with the Interpartner website.
Yeah, that one.
But it's also slightly archaic, and because I'm like kind of responsible for a lot of the stuff, and I have my limits, I can't really manage everything. But it could be better. And we're actually thinking of trying to do a blog, but that's another project which would need help and like volunteers, I think. But
so people can contact you directly, I suppose.
Yeah, sure.
You can find your mail or your
my email's there, and then they can drop me a line.
That's probably the best way. If anyone listens to the end, I never know.
Yeah, you should put it at the beginning. That's the thing about the opening. We could talk about that later. Every podcast has the same opening.
I need to create that. I haven't gotten that far.
No worries. You're on your way.
Yeah.
you're on your way. But I really appreciate it. I was very like touched and like excited that you're like interested in about IwIP and want to talk, and it's a really nice conversation. Perhaps we can repeat it again in like a year or something and see what's changed. Or something like
for
that.
sure. If who knows what will happen. It was easy conversation. I think you're easy to talk to, and when the interest is genuine, it's like easier to talk about as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, good questions too. It's good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I should thank also like how it is in IwIP. Remember to be kind to yourself.
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
Thank you,
yes, exactly.
Alex, and thank you, Mili.
Okay.
Hey, see you around.
See you around. Moi moi.